Welcome to the Calm Cockpit Podcast, the show that helps pilots think clearly, stay calm, and perform at their best when it matters most. Each episode delivers practical strategies, real-world aviation wisdom, and mindset tools that help create confident pilots and safe flights.
Today, we're talking about something almost every high performer experiences at some point in their careers, but very few actually openly discuss it: the dreaded yips.
This is that strange phenomenon where something you've done flawlessly hundreds or thousands of times suddenly feels difficult, unnatural, or even terrifying. When a golfer suddenly can't make a 3-foot putt, or a baseball pitcher can't throw a strike to save their life, or in my case, a musician freezes during a passages that we have mastered for years. And yeah, maybe pilots, we experience it too. We have that bad landing, you fail a check ride, a simulator bust, or in my case, it can be that accumulated self-pressure and stress. And suddenly our confidence collapses and our brain starts monitoring every movement instead of simply performing the way we know we can.
Today, we're going to break it down. What are the yips actually? Why pilots are particularly vulnerable to this? How the nervous system creates the spiral itself? And most importantly, proven techniques to recover and return to elite performance. The Calm Cockpit Podcast starts now.
Onyx 1-2 Mike Oscar, runway 27, clear for takeoff.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Geeta Brown, midlife student pilot and yoga and music educator. And I've recovered from the yips a lot because I'm also a musician. And boy, do I have a lot of self-experience with that feeling. I can't wait to get into it a little bit today. Who are you, John? Who is this person I'm with?
And I'm John Niehaus, professional pilot and flight instructor who, I can bring the pilot side of the yips conversation to this. So yeah, we're both in good company, I think.
How are we going to start with this? Should we talk about what are the yips anyway?
It sounds like a crazy term that somebody made up, and they probably did, but it originated back in the early 20th century, and it was actually in golf. Basically, it was described as when experienced golfers suddenly lost the fine motor skills to control themselves during putting. They just stopped being able to do it. Now, I'm going to butcher this guy's name potentially, but it all sprang from a Mr. Tommy Armour. He described the yips as a brain spasm that impairs short game performance, and explains that athletes historically thought the yips at the time were purely psychological, neurological, or even potentially both. They really didn't understand it. I'm not quite sure we do now, frankly, in all the research that we've done. Modern science also suggests that it's a blend of anxiety, over control, which I think is my problem, and just general motor disruption. What do you think? I know that we're talking about it from an aviation standpoint, but as you mentioned in the introduction, musicians encounter this quite a bit as well, right?
Yes, we do. And very often as a music educator, I see it in students who are at that elite level, or they are what I would call advanced intermediate or advanced or professional level. I never see the yips with beginners or intermediates. It's for people who already have skills mastered and they find a different relationship to pressure once those skills are mastered. Generally, I see it in people who are a little more type A, which is another way of saying people who have anxiety, quite frankly, because people who tend to control a lot, and I'm talking about myself here, in the therapeutic lens, we usually say you don't have control. What you actually have is anxiety. So that feeling of needing to be in control of things is actually trying to self-modulate your behavior or sort of self-regulate yourself away from a feeling of anxiety by over-controlling a situation. So with music, I see musicians that it is a function of things that should be under unconscious control, automated. Suddenly you start observing and trying to regulate what you're doing and narrating things that you already know how to do. And that classic thing of you get in your own way. So neurological, psychosocial, motor. It's everything because the whole body-mind system is all connected. So that's good news because it means in our solutions, if one solution doesn't work for you, the psychological, the physical one will. If that one doesn't work, you can go on a neurological bent to try to sort of correct it for yourself. So there's a different flavor or pathway into playing your way out of the yips. And that's the fun part because you can play with a lot of different techniques because it is regulated by all these different systems because we are all interconnected with psychology, neurology, motor planning, all that.
That's a lot to say that when we get in our own heads, bad things happen. So, which I know very well, and we'll get to some of those things. Now, one of the core concepts for all of this is the conscious interference destroys the automatic nature of what we're trying to do. The idea that high-level performance depends on procedural memory and subconscious execution. Now, that's kind of a lot of big words. Let's break this down. Let's go for it, Geeta. I'm going to hand you that.
Yeah. So when we have something like, let's use a music skill here, right? So we'll keep it to something abstract. We have something like, say, a musician, they have a passage to a concerto. They've played hundreds of times. They've been practicing this concerto. Like I'm thinking of a student I had. By this time, he was a performing musician getting paid to play in front of the orchestra, right? And he had been playing this concerto probably since high school. When I started working with him, he was in his late 20s and already getting, paid as a professional. But he would get towards a high note in the concerto. And every time he'd get there, he would biff the high note, right? He had classic case of the yips. The note that he had hit so effortlessly since high school, now all of a sudden when he's paid to perform in front of people, every time he'd run up to it, there would be a very interesting noise that would happen instead of the high note. So at that point, you would have hoped that the concerto would have been so drilled through just sheer repetition of playing it so many times that it is just part of his procedural memory, which means I call it the 2 a.m. test. I mean, like, you have to have this concerto down that I come to your house at 2 a.m. I hand you the horn and I say, John, here's a clarinet. Start on measure 36 of the Mozart clarinet concerto. Go. And that you can just, without thinking, it just runs on your automatic processing because those neural pathways have been laid so strongly that you only need a small response to elicit a memory. And that's really how this procedural memory gets encoded for musicians and for pilots who have enough experience. I don't count as a pilot who has this, but you do, John, because you've done enough landings to have that procedural knowledge. They say neurons that fire together wire together. So when you repeat something, for my student's case, the Mozart clarinet concerto over and over and over again, those neurons have literally laid down a thick track in the brain where one or two notes of it literally starts to fire the memory of all of the notes that come after it, which means that the cerebral cortex, the thinking part of your brain, the part of us that decides if we want milk in our tea that morning or if we're going to have coffee instead, that part doesn't get involved. That small trigger of, oh, here's the beginning of the concerto elicits the response in the motor planning and also in the interpretive, more creative, artistic areas of the brain to elicit all of the other notes that come after it. Shooting the ILS, hopefully some of that material is proceduralized, where a small trigger then elicits the motor cascade of everything that needs to happen without you going, next I need to do X, Y, and Z. So that's how memories are encoded. Neurons that fire together wire together. In the case of my student who was biffing the high note, that automated process of one note leading to a next in an unbroken chain of neurons firing was being interrupted by his thinking brain. And his thinking brain was saying, don't mess it up. Everyone in the audience knows what that high note is. High notes are really hard on the clarinet. Use just enough pressure, but not too much pressure. Don't bite too hard, you'll squeak, but you need to bite a little bit so that you get the note out. Like all of this knowledge and information then starts to narrate and dictate what should be the neurons firing in sequence without conscious control. And it starts to interrupt with almost like this narrator's voice. And that narrator's voice then produces, the brain goes, excuse me, would you like to run my automatic process of running this procedure or running this concerto? Or would you like me to pay attention to the other part of your brain that's narrating these steps that I should be doing automatically? And usually what happens then is a mistake. And then that is what we call the yips, or in my student's case, he would squeak. And if you ever heard a clarinet squeak on a high note, everybody knows that it's a squeak. And people, the audience members will even like jump in their seat and cringe because it's like a harsh, loud, not pretty sound. You can miss a note on the piano and it still sounds pretty. It's just a wrong note. On the clarinet, everybody knows that you squeaked. So did I answer your question? It should be this conscious programming. Neurons that fire together wire together. A small stimulus elicits the full response. But when we start to narrate the response and try to control it, that's when we get in trouble. So if you're having the yips, it means that you're really advanced. Congratulations.
Hooray.
Hooray. You're probably not a beginner anymore. The key is to how to be a beginner even when you're an expert, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah. So, one of the things in the notes here that I really like, and I want to read it out loud, but I also want to reframe it for people because it uses the word fear. And I don't think fear is in fear being afraid. So let's get to this. It says fear replaces trust. And maybe for some people, there is some legitimate, like, I'm afraid kind of fear. But I know, like, from my experience, especially in the level of aviation that I'm in right now, I'm not afraid of the airplane. I'm not afraid of the things that I'm doing. I'm more afraid of screwing up. I'm more afraid of what am I going to do? How am I going to look? How is the passenger going to feel about this landing? And so it's not fear in the traditional sense. It's more of just, again, back to that whole concept of performance anxiety. You can do it. You just want to do it the best you can. And it goes back to some of the episodes we've talked about previously, is that we care too much as pilots.
Yeah.
If we didn't care, I think we'd be a lot better, frankly.
Yeah, you're so right.
And so I kind of feel this in my bones here, the whole idea of fear replaces trust. So when we're talking about some of the things, and you mentioned these already, the whole concept of performance anxiety and the breathing that we have talked about in so many episodes that all comes back to this. I mean, you hear us say it so many times, but it's sort of that one common thread that weaves through all of this. The more you can bring your heart rate down, the more you can control your breathing, the better your performance will be, but you have to learn to do it. And as you have said multiple times, you can't do it 5 minutes before as your first time and expect to have any kind of actual performance increase. So it has to be something that's practiced over time.
John, you're starting to sound like me.
I know, I'm learning stuff here. And so, you've got the heart rate, you've got the breathing, you've got the tension. How many times have we talked about the whole concept of the more you death stick, the worse it gets? It's that muscle tension that you have to control. If you're thinking about how hard you're gripping the yoke as you're landing, guess what you're not thinking about? The landing. So it's the expansion of just your awareness of your surroundings in general, but it has to be natural. Yeah. And that's the hardest part, especially from a flight instructor standpoint, because when a student comes to me and goes, well, how can I land? Or I did a bad landing. What am I supposed to do? And I know that this is going on. I can't tell them just like, hey, zen out and don't do that. Like you can't.
Right.
You can't do that. It's like telling somebody who's having a panic attack to calm down. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, they're going to smack you in the face.
Right.
Like, thanks a lot. I feel better already. Yeah.
What I want to do throughout this episode is show people who may or may not be encountering this that some very high performance people, very successful people have encountered this too. And so we're going to sprinkle this in through the episode. And I've got a list of them here. And I think this one is one that's worth talking about. We all know, or you should all know, Shaquille O'Neal, right? Famous basketball player, famous for breaking the backboard on his dunk in that one time back in the 90s. Yeah. And we all also know he wasn't the best at shooting free throws.
Brick City. Bricks dropping everywhere. Oh, yeah.
Guess who knew it the most?
Jack did. He sure did. Yep.
Shaquille O'Neal, he knew it. And he knew it every single time he got fouled, that he was going to have to go and do this thing in front of thousands, millions of people watching on TV. It became this thing. And despite the criticism, he continued competing aggressively without allowing one weakness to define his entire identity. Okay, let's think about that for a second. One bad landing, one bad approach, a bad check ride, that cannot be allowed to define your identity. And so in relation to the pilots, you have to find that weak area. You have to practice it. You can get better at it, but also understanding that maybe it's not your strongest suit is a superpower that you can use to try to be better. And it can be embarrassing. You know, it can be one of those things where, oh my gosh, that was not good. My brief stint at an airline, my very first landing, I think we've talked about this before. The captain who I was flying with was like, I think we're just going to keep the door closed. Like, yeah, that was not a great day, but it had to happen. It had to happen so that I could get better.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about a self-fulfilling prophecy and you think about somebody who's probably gone through that, the more Shaq thought about that brick city that you just mentioned, probably the more bricks he threw.
Right.
But he didn't give up. He ended up getting better. And I think over the course of his career, especially towards the end, it wasn't quite as bad as it was when he started.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was so bad because that was like back in the days. I grew up watching the Chicago Bulls. So we played him a lot and they were really competitive. And we're always like, yes, foul him all the time because that was points on the board that he was leaving hanging there. I think you're picking at something that's really crucial, particularly like the elite musicians that I work with who are willing to go there in this process and they find that helpful. When we really start to unpick it, for some people, the yip is actually like a call to action. Not always. Sometimes it's just something that's happening and you work through it and you move on. But sometimes it's a call to action from the psyche that there is a pattern of learning and a pattern of unconscious behavior that was helpful when you were a beginner or an intermediate, but that is no longer serving you and that there's a new opportunity for how you approach learning in your life. So very often the elite musicians that I'm working with are perfectionists and they use that driving and being over-prepared. And I'm also looking at myself in this because I still do that to this day. Got to rein it on in, right? Being wildly over-prepared, almost to a point of like working too much at something, right? Like just going a little too far with it. That worked when they were beginners and intermediates and they got a lot of success, right? And they got so far with it. However, along with that overwork came a lot of over-worry. So when they were programming those neurons that were firing together that I was describing, not only were they programming the motor planning of how to execute the passage, they were also programming very quietly underneath all of it, this little limiting belief. Don't screw up. Don't suck. Everyone's going to know if you miss it. You have to do this. Otherwise, you're going to get found out that you're no good. There's like this quiet lack of confidence that they're trying to outperform. And I know I used to do that big time. I would just try to be so good that no one could ever be angry at me, right? It'd be so amazing that no one would ever find out that I was really insecure. And that worked to a point until, like, even for me, sometimes the yips would come up. It really helps me then in those moments and has helped my students to slow down and to find ways to look for those underlying quiet beliefs that are under there. For some of them, it would work through journaling. Some of them did go talk to a counselor or a therapist. Some of them would just read books like there's one, The Inner Game of Tennis, which was so good. Musicians made them write it, The Inner Game of Music. But I think you can read both of those as a pilot and you just apply it. It all makes so much sense. There's also another book called Soprano on Her Head by Eloise Ristad, which is all about singers who choke and can't sing the high notes and how she would literally put them standing upside down and they could sing beautifully. And as soon as they would stand back up in a concert, they would choke and could not sing anymore. So it was all about getting out of your own way. But whatever way you working through those books, working with a counselor, working with a sports psychologist, even on aviation stuff, I had different mental performance coaches throughout my life for business that I would work on some of this stuff with. Getting at some of those beliefs that you've layered along with your procedural memory can be this magical key. It is painful work. It's hard. It's not easy. It's a little messy. It's a little ethereal at times, but for a little bit of work that you put into it, hearing that voice that's in your head telling you you're either not good enough or you're going to mess it up or whatever it is, or some voice from a parent, something they said when you were 3 will pop up and you didn't even know you've been carrying that stuff around your whole life. The feeling uncomfortable will not hurt you. The feeling awkward and insecure talking about it will not hurt you. But the lack of addressing those really limiting, hurtful beliefs that you're carrying around can hurt you and can hurt other people around you. So look at it. It is what you're programming in at a subconscious level along with the motor planning will eventually come out the better and better you get at the skill. Isn't that weird? It's so weird to me, right? That subconscious programming, it will eventually come out. That's why, again, elite performers, this is where you see it because that built-in pressure. So how do you learn? And, it's Tammy Barlett says it. Our good friend Tammy Barlett, the great high-performance coach for aviators. Strive for perfection. Don't be a perfectionist, which is perfect. Now when I'm training, I say to myself, I'm learning. This is interesting. I'm just going to observe what happens today. I'm constantly just saying little phrases like that are kind of light and airy and just no pressure, so that as I'm training, I'm not training and like, don't screw it up, do okay. You have to be okay at this. Otherwise, you're going to hurt yourself and hurt other people, because I know that that's what's going to bubble up later. So these are good opportunities for us to look under the surface of your mind. Go see what's in there.
So this is one that I feel deeply on, and frankly, been going through a little bit myself. We're in the slow time of the year for our flying. We just haven't had a lot on the schedule, which is nice. I mean, it's always nice to have a job where they don't ask you to do a whole lot. But from a pilot standpoint, when you don't fly, you accumulate a little bit of rust over time, especially if you're somewhat new to the airplane. That's when the overthinking starts to occur. So if you haven't flown in 3 weeks, in a month, however long that is for you, that you start to stretch that comfort level. The next piece of this is that over control of automatic skills, right? So you know how to land the airplane, you know how to fly the airplane, but maybe a little bit of time creeps in and you start to go, okay, I know I could be a little bit rusty. I'm going to make sure that I go through all the proper steps. I'm going to walk myself through it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And again, back to that overthinking, you are now turning into a robot. Instead of thinking about what you're doing, you're mechanically going step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Oh, that didn't go well. And then if you have another leap of time before you fly again, you go, okay, well, the last time 2 weeks ago, I went through all the steps and man, that didn't go well. I really want this one to go well. You start to then automate even more. So as our little outline here talks about, and it says automatic motor programs become disrupted when performers consciously micromanage movements. And this is where I struggle because literally I do this. I will be sitting there thinking about, okay, it's got to be good. It's got to be, like you said, perfect. I really want it to succeed. And I start trying to think about every small little movement, center line and pitch and speed and this and that and this and that, and bam, there's the runway. And you know, how bad are they actually? Probably not that bad.
Yeah.
But in my head, anything outside of the perfection that I'm looking for is a failure.
Yeah.
Which is a whole other episode that we've already done. But the more I try to micromanage my movements, instead of just letting my brain and my body flow through what I know needs to happen, and you see it, you feel it, and it works, that you become that ultra rigid pilot. And then your landings, guess what? They become ultra rigid as well. And so I really like this idea that, again, the performance people will consciously micromanage their movements, and it just continues to make things worse.
Yeah. Picking at a perceived problem only makes it worse. Just think about someone who nags you. How does that feel? Not good, but we nag ourselves all the time. We nag ourselves all the time. One of my yoga teachers always says you can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. And at some point as adults, we have to decide, how am I going to talk to myself, and monitor that a little bit and be kinder to ourselves. Because with the yips, here's the deal. There isn't actually a problem that needs to be fixed. There is no problem. Our mind is telling us, there's a problem. I have the yips. There is no problem. Another yoga teacher told me once, he probably got this from someone else. The bad news is you just fell out of an airplane and you do not have a parachute. But the good news is there is no ground. And we were all like, what? He's like, yeah, there actually is no problem. Now that requires a little mental shift. And again, I'm just going to take this back to music, because as an educator, that's what I can speak to. I don't want to go telling pilots how to work on this, because that's a little beyond my area of expertise. But for that over-controlling and over-correcting thing that you were talking about, I had another student who was not quite expert level yet, but he was an adult musician who did it like for fun. And he came to his first clarinet lesson. He was so rigid, so tight that I was like, how is breath even entering this man's body? Because he was like, he was like so freaking locked. And he's like, I can't play high notes. And I'm like, yeah, well, no wonder. Like the reed couldn't even vibrate because he was clenching so hard. It was like, "Gah." So I was like, all right, if I tell him that he's too rigid and he's too tense, that's not going to help, right? That'd be like telling you on landing, John, relax, you got to relax. Like it doesn't work, you know? So I was like, all right, well, what is the opposite thing we can do? I also wanted to test and see if he was going to actually stay in my studio, because I'm a little different in how I teach. And so I like to just show that in the first lesson so people can see if it's going to be a good fit, or if it's not a good fit, then they know they don't have to waste their time. So I said, okay, I want you to, we had this big long hallway at the conservatory, and luckily no one else was around. I said, I want you to play this scale, but I want you to play it walking to the end of the hallway and play it walking back. I said, when's the last time you played your clarinet while you were moving? He was like, never. I always sit. I said, perfect. Let's do the opposite thing. Put a metronome on. So we had to walk at like an andante tempo. Click, step, 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 not too fast, not too slow. He could do it, but it was enough that he had to think about walking. And it was a scale that was easy that I knew it was in his automatic process to play the F major scale, but his attention was now diverted towards walking on tempo and walking slowly and not running into the walls. He played beautifully. He walked the whole length of the hallway and came all the way back, played a 3-octave F major scale. I was like, how is that? He's like, wow, my tone sounds really good down here. We were in this basement area. I'm like, it's not the basement that's doing it. It's that we're inducing a sense of ease in your body by moving through space in a different way and shifting, as you were saying, John, instead of the brain hyper controlling and managing everything that's automated, now your brain is focusing on actually inducing ease in the body through moving in a very slow, flowy manner while you're letting the automatic process of the scale just happen. Now, how do we translate that to pilots? I'm not entirely sure. I know what I do, at least in my little baby pilot land, because I still am a baby pilot, is when I catch myself, and I so often get so tight, as I'm getting towards check ride, I feel everything is like, all the moments where I can, when I'm doing clearing turns, I consciously think base of the feet release, hips release, spine is long, shoulders are relaxed, crown of the head is raised. I just go through that little sequence that I do all the time. And then I do another clearing turn and I take a breath. So I'm kind of consciously at least resetting my physical system to release a little bit. I would also, if some pilot came to me and they're like, help me brainstorm how to kind of undo this, I would say if you're someone that is experiencing like what you were saying, John, I'd say play with things where the only way you can be successful is to learn that line between effort and ease. Because what you're describing, John, is that it's over controlling. And most people think like, oh, well, I need to relax. Well, yeah, but you don't want to be a limp noodle. Because that doesn't work either. You want to know the right effort at the right time. And I think that's the misnomer that people get with like yoga, meditation, tai chi. They think we're just going to just be limp and just float through and do whatever. No, actually, it's really being strategic about when you're putting effort in and when you're releasing. So things like surfing are great for that because you have to go with the ocean. You can't control it. You have to literally flow with the ocean. Tai chi is an excellent practice to do with this because it shows you how to move through space in a very slow, yes, flowing way, but the choreography is very complex that you have to concentrate on it, but you can't be too rigid because you literally can't perform the movement. So it's showing your body how to move in a very slow and flowing way. And if you have a great Tai Chi teacher like I do, they also show you the martial arts application of the movement too. They show you how to do it slow, and then you do it bam, 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 like in a sequence of hitting and deflecting. So you see how the same movement can be done slow and flowing or very aggressive or defensively. And that does translate into your neuropsychology of how you handle life. You find yourself then in a situation where you're under pressure and your body knows how to relax but remain focused. Other sports do this as well, but I think things like Aikido do it well. I think the martial arts, Tai Chi, yoga, they've really got a lock on that body-mind training that I think pilots could really benefit from personally. Let's all just do Tai Chi together and then let's go land a plane and see how it goes. We're just going to flow through the procedures. It's less about reacting and more about using your energy appropriately.
Yeah, well, and similar to the example with Shaq, I mean, the idea that we as pilots can attach our identity to our performance is huge. And that's probably the number one issue that we have going for us.
Yeah.
And again, identifying it's one thing, working through it is a whole nother thing. And if you think you have it bad, okay? Again, we're giving these examples so that you know that you're not alone. There was a Major League Baseball pitcher named Steve Blass. He had it so bad that they actually named the condition after him.
Oh.
They called it Steve Blass disease.
Oh, God.
So again, if you think you have it bad, this guy, I don't know what team he played for, but yeah, I can't imagine. And basically the story is that he suddenly lost command of even the most basic of his pitching throws.
Oh, no.
His struggles became so famous, they named it after him. he went through psychological testing. He did all the things that you could imagine a high performance person who basically lost their skills would do. The psychologist later identified that it was back to this excessive control, this rigidity. He was analyzing every movement that he was going through. And the more he tried to control it, the worse it got. And so if you think it can happen on your landings, imagine it being in the World Series, trying to pitch a baseball in front of millions of people and just not being able to do it when you once could.
Wow. And I think that's so interesting that it comes down to that over control. And I see this a lot in the modern educational culture. I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before, that we put an over reliance on our cerebral cortex, the thinking part of our brain. We prioritize that knowledge and information as being the pinnacle of understanding, when actually that part of our brain is very intelligent. It can do really great things. I mean, we just sent Artemis around the moon and back, it does great things, but it's also limited. It's one piece of what we can do. When we start to look at ourselves as an integrated whole of the body-mind complex and how much processing goes on in the brain that is beneath our conscious processing, that's really where the secret sauce and the power is. It's not World Series baseball, but I had the worst case of the yips with this driving thing, very specific driving instance, and it all stems to childhood trauma. Let's open the vault of Gita's life here. Okay, my sister has this really cute bungalow north of Chicago. And if you know Chicago neighborhoods at all, long, skinny lots, all very close together, but flat. Her driveway looks like it's straight, but it is not. She's had 5 different contractors of, plumbers, all this. All of them have run into her neighbor's fence because she tells them, when you back out of my driveway, it looks straight, but it's not. And they'll go, what are you talking about, lady? It's fine. And then bam, they hit her fence. I was there 2 years ago and the whole family was in her backyard and I was leaving. And she goes, now remember, my driveway's not straight. I'm like, oh, crap. So there I am backing up. My husband's in the passenger seat. I'm backing up and I started over controlling. Like, too close to the fence. So I pull forward. Then I go back again. It took me like 20 minutes to get down that driveway. And the whole time I was like sweating. I was tense. I looked at my husband. I'm like, I flew an airplane 2 days ago. I drive all the time. I drive in Boston with no problems. Parallel park in Harvard. But backing down my sister's driveway took me so long and I was so yippy. I was over controlling everything, almost hit the fence 3 times. I'm like, what is that? He's like, you turned into 8-year-old Gita again. The baby of the family who doesn't know how to do anything, afraid of making a mistake. Mom's watching, sister's watching, everyone's like judging you. And he's like, you choked. You totally choked. I'm like, I did. I choked backing down a freaking driveway. Thank God I had an opportunity to correct that. I was there recently and I was like, relax. It's just a driveway. There is no ground. And I just backed it on up with no problem. I was so proud of myself. I worked through my little psychological block. But it can show up in so many ways, though. But that was literally because I felt self-conscious doing it in front of my family. Isn't that weird how the mind works?
It's wild. It's
bizarre. Bizarre. And it caught me totally by surprise. So yeah, the more we try to control, the worse it gets. And that was all about my self-identity and the family structure.
I think what everybody's looking for is, well, we know what this is. What do we do about it? And there's the last piece before we get to some of the solutions here is just that notion that ties into all of this, which is the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's the idea of when you start to doubt, when you start to think you can't do it, well, it becomes reality, right? So the poor performance then triggers the fear of repeating it, which then triggers the hyper focus and tension and the rigidity that we talked about, which then creates a worse performance, reinforcing the initial idea that, oh, shoot, I'm going to mess this up.
Yep.
And so how do we break the cycle? What do we do to get from step 5 of reinforcing that threat to just, breaking the mirror and starting over?
When you find out that magic sauce, please let me know.
God, I don't even have an answer to this.
Well, I have small answers. My number one thing with the yips in general is always to first stop and identify, is it my own brain giving me a call to action, that there's something actually that was useful for me before that isn't useful anymore, that I need to shift my approach to life, quite honestly, because sometimes it is that deep. Or is this just a transitory experience I'm going through because maybe there's other life stress going on and I just have a heightened stress response right now. So it's kind of fixating on this one thing. And that usually gives me then a track for like, how am I going to break that cycle? If it's something I feel like, I feel like there's some limiting beliefs there that worked well for me in my 20s to kind of outperform, but now I'm 50. Maybe I can change some of that and find ways to deal with that, like sort of deeper level stuff, find people that can help you with that, or just journal about it, talk to friends. Or if I look at it, I go, driving down my sister's driveway, there was a lot of life stress then, a lot of family, stuff happening, people are moving. There's just a lot going on. I was just stressed and tired. Let me address my overall life stress and not hyper focus on the backing down the driveway. So kind of identifying those two things. Is it a more systemic stress load that you're under in your life and you can look at that more globally? Or is it a specific thought or behavior pattern that you build into how you train that maybe would like to be shifted a little bit in a more helpful and fun, quite honestly, manner? That all being said, in general, for us yogis, when we encounter something that is not helpful, we try to substitute the opposite positive thing. So the opposite positive thing might be something like going up with a flying friend and just, flying for fun. What is that? Not tied to performance, not tied to the job, not tied to something big and heavy. The opposite positive thing can be doing things like trying something new in your life, like literally getting your brain out of that track and that rut that it's in and trying something completely brand new. Opposite positive thing for me is something like going out into the woods, and I haven't done this in ages, going bird watching, which I used to do all the time and I had kind of forgotten was a passion. And I found myself in a patch of woods and I heard all these spring birds and I started identifying them and watching them. I felt completely different after 20 minutes of that than I did prior to doing that because it was so opposite of the stress and the pressure I feel like I'm under right now. Sometimes doing those opposite positive things, they don't seem productive. They don't seem related to what you're doing. They make no sense on paper. Most high performers will think they're a waste of time. Those are the things that we need to be doing because those are literally the things that help to reset the nervous system in a way that is more balanced, with more equanimity, and we come back from that better able to discern what is important and where our energy needs to go. If we keep trying to fix the problem by just picking at the problem, it's like picking at a scab. It never heals. Sometimes we need to redirect ourselves to other healthy, seemingly non-productive things because that is actually going to restore productivity. So this is Geeta saying go take a nap, have a snack, go watch some birds. Be like a 3-year-old again.
What if you're in the airplane? And I have a couple tips for this too, and I wish I could claim that they were mine. There's ways of diverting your attention. And I like this particular quote here, and it says, calm is a skill, not a prerequisite. Okay. So you don't have to be tranquil just to go into whatever it is that you're going into. It is okay to have a little bit of anxiousness. It is okay to be like, well, let's see how this goes, because it's just part of life, right? We're not in a position where we can do a podcast where we can say, we're going to take away all of the things that stress you out. It's just not possible. And trying to eliminate that anxiety or that stress will often make it worse.
Yep.
And so now you've had that bad landing, you've had some of those things, and you're starting to focus on it. One of the things that actually one of my coworkers and I talked about, and he's like, well, whenever I have something like that, I focus on what I can control. He's like, the one thing I can do is put my butt on the center line. He's like, if I just use that as the thing that I can micro control and keep that airplane on the center line, then I'm not thinking about the crosswind. I'm not thinking about my last landing. I'm not thinking about when I flare. I'm not thinking about how fast I'm going. My brain is controlling all of those things and maintaining a safe and stabilized approach, but I'm overthinking on that center line. And if I end up being a little bit off of that center line because I'm being a little bit rigid, there's some tolerances there. You don't want to be all the way to the left or to the right. You want to keep it as best you can.
Yeah.
But it allows you to hyperfixate on that thing, and then the rest of the picture falls into place.
I love it.
And I thought that was a really profound advice. That's what he's been telling me as I've been like, oh, I really don't want to biff this landing. He's like, just focus on the center line.
Yeah.
The rest of it comes to pass.
I
think that's really good advice.
It's fantastic advice. I love that. Reminds me of aim small, miss small. You just focus on that one little point of awareness and just let yourself be there. I just wrote that down. That is coming with me into the cockpit because I talk a lot, as you notice, but having these short phrases you can say when you're in the moment is gold because it cuts through all the noise and it just redirects you. That's really good. Tell your coworker, Gita says thank you.
That's right. But on center line.
Hopefully he listens to the podcast. Thank you. I'm a coworker.
Part of the advice here is also just let that confidence rebuild over time, right? So that one landing after you maybe had a stressful one, maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's not supposed to be. Maybe you need the extra time to build that repetition back. Because if you remember when you first started figuring out how to fly, whatever airplane it is that you're currently flying, your landings probably weren't great then either. But you made it to your private pilot check ride. You made it to your commercial pilot check ride. You made it to your type rating check ride. And by the time you did that, landing after landing after landing after landing, you did get to that point. And this is where, back to what you had originally said in the very, very beginning of this, it is more about those that have already proven to be good. You've practiced, you've put in the effort, and all of a sudden you've taken that weird slump backwards, which does happen. You have to remember to give yourself the grace to rebuild it in the same amount of time, or probably less time than it took to get there in the first place, because it's not going to be that line graph where it dives below zero and then comes straight back to where it was. It just doesn't happen. So give yourself the grace to rebuild it over time.
Love it. Love it. I have flown with a number of CFIs now. It's been really cool to see the different personalities. And there's been a couple of times where like coming back, the crosswinds were way beyond what I could do as a student. And they're like, we can still go up today, but I'll do the landing. That way we can still practice. I'm like, cool. So I did it with one CFI and it was not a great landing. Wasn't great. That particular CFI had a huge negative reaction to it. It was like a problem, right? This was like on and on about the landing and this. It was such a stressful, like big problem. I was like, okay, that's how that person handled that. Flew with another CFI, same deal. Actually, that crosswind was gnarly. Woo! He put it down firmly. I think there was a bounce maybe in there, but then we got down and he was like, yeah, there's a little gust there, whatever. He shrugged it off just like no big deal. I had another person I flew with now who was super analytical about it, really wanted to go through like every minutia of his landing and what he liked about it, what he would do differently. And what I took away from that, from those three different pilots, is the one who had what I would have considered to be like the quote unquote roughest landing, the least pretty out of all of them, was the one who was like the least reactive. And it didn't seem to stick to him at all. He was just like, yeah, there was a gust there at the end, handled it. Fox almost ran out in front of us. It was almost a go around. It was like a whole lot of things happened. And he was like, yeah, it was fine. And I talked to this fellow later and turns out he also used to be a skydiver and used to do all this other stuff. Like he's got a bigger risk tolerance. But my point is for all of this is that the immediate aftermath of having a moment where maybe you've been less than graceful very often will determine if you get stuck in a cycle of the yips or not. And so the gentleman who was just like, yeah, that wasn't great. Here's what I could have done better. I think next time I'll do that. And he just moved on right away. It's very different than the person who got like stuck in it and made a big drama out of it. So the immediate aftermath can really, really change how it gets kind of planted in your brain and how you revisit that memory over time. Is it a big deal or is it just one landing? Gives me hope for my own little 2 bounces and a skip landings that have been known to happen. Do you want to talk about how to fix it?
Let's fix it.
Okay. I mean, it's sort of sprinkled a lot of this, I think, throughout the episode, kind of here and there. But one of the number one things that I have found that has helped me with my own musical yips, my own driving yips, and then for musicians is number one, having some kind of thing that you do in your life that helps you regulate your anxiety. Because to me, like the yips is all it's anxiety and control is anxiety. Like you don't have control, you have anxiety. So if we kind of drill down, we know, thank God, how we can help anxiety. Anxiety does not have to go away. Fear does not have to go away. In fact, we want it to be there. It gives us that edge, that focus, that extra bit of impetus. We like stress. It helps us grow. We just want it to be in proportion so that it doesn't take over our life. So when I say manage anxiety, it's just like, for me, it's more like putting my arm around it and just having it with me instead of anxiety is driving my actions. And we know how to manage anxiety comes through what we eat. I know this, you don't think helping with the yips would be food, but it absolutely does. Your neurochemical makeup of your brain will get overstimulated by too much caffeine and too much sugar and not enough protein to produce a more stressful response, which will make you more susceptible to the effects of the yips. And it will create that spiral you were talking about. It's hard to outperform a brain that is underfueled. So if you are dehydrated, over-caffeinated, and over-sugared, all of the neurochemicals that are in there are primed to fire at a fast, overreactive level with a low cognitive ability. So you have overreaction of the nervous system, and then the cognitive part of your brain doesn't have enough fuel to make sense of it. And you can literally create an anxious person by feeding them the incorrect foods for a long enough period of time. So eat your protein, get some fresh fruit, some fresh veg, get some yogurt if you eat that. Make sure you're hydrated with electrolytes. That will go such a long way. I cannot tell you the amount of students that I've had who've changed their performance when they have started to manage their diet more effectively, because it gives you clearer thinking, because it's literally like putting the proper fuel in the body. You are what you eat turns out to be true. And more concretely as well, breath work is amazing. And there's so many different ways we're going to do. I think our next joint episode is going to be on breath work. So look for that in a couple episodes. I'm going to do a whole discussion of all different ways to do breath work so you can find a way that really works for you. But we do know that slowing down the breath rate helps not only the brain processes to slow down, helps the heart rate to slow down, helps the blood pressure to slow down, helps the neuromodulators in your sympathetic nervous system to downregulate, which just means it just calms everything down. And when everything is calmer, those neurons that are firing together fire in a more even, systematic way, rather than getting caught in loops and hyperrigidity. Another great way to work on it on a more global level is to work on ways that you are training your body to feel the difference between over effort and under efforting. So looking for things like progressive muscle relaxations, where you consciously tense and then release muscles, can start to teach you the difference between too much tension, where you're actually inducing this kind of yippee response, versus too lax, where you're not able to actually do anything. So you have under your mastery exactly the right amount of effort at the right time. We call it MEME, minimum effort, maximum efficiency. Me. And that training in your daily life through getting in the gym and lifting weights, through taking walks out in nature, playing with your kids, playing a sport, that teaches your whole sort of chemistry of your body and your mind and your motor planning how to do that. So then when you're in an airplane, that's a skill that you just have with you as part of your being. You're not trying to like do it while you're operating a very complex machine. This is all about what I would call changing your relationship to pressure. Because the yips come up because the relationship with pressure has changed now that you're an expert. So congratulations, you're an expert if you have the yips. Wonderful Master Suzuki said, in a beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In an expert's mind, there are few. In a beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In an expert's mind, there are few. So if the things that I said before, you're not going to eat your fruit and veggies and you don't want to breathe and you don't want to do any of that stuff. Hopefully you want to breathe. If we can look at our own mind and say, are my yips happening because I think there's only this black and white thinking? There's one way to do the procedure right. And if I don't do it right, it's wrong. That's not a beginner's mind. That's an expert's mind that has become rigid and fixed, black or white. Whereas a beginner is like, oh, I drifted a little bit that way. What happens if I come back this way? And it's like the effortless correction to the change happens. Think again of a surfer. They're not freaking out if they're a little bit off. They just kind of skillfully, with the least amount of effort, nudge it back. And that is true mastery, is mastering that overreaction to the moment. So allowing yourself to be a beginner again. Last little thing. So I had breath work, eat your fruit and veggies, make sure you're hydrated with electrolytes, understand that more control isn't the answer by doing progressive muscle relaxation, tensing and releasing, and then strategic refocusing I would use actually while flying, which is the thing that I've learned so far that works, which is doing simple things like, clenching and releasing my feet. And like I said, when I'm doing a clearing turn, I'll say, I feel my feet, I'm releasing my hips, I'm lengthening my spine, my shoulders are relaxed, the crown of my head is tall. That little reset takes 2 seconds, but I'm literally just going through the body, resetting the physical system as a way of letting my mind have a moment of resetting. Oh, last technique, meditate. You know, we couldn't get out of an episode without saying that. The greatest benefit for someone, if you're experiencing the yips right now, or you're struggling with it, please do know that you are not actually your thoughts. Thoughts are simply transitory experiences that move through the mind, like clouds in the sky float by or leaves on a stream float by, you are not actually your thoughts. And that sounds good, but when you sit in meditation and have a direct experience of thoughts just being material things that arise and then go away, that is real freedom. And that can give a little breath of freedom when we find ourselves getting caught by these things of messing up under pressure or feeling that. It is so completely freeing. In yoga, we look at thoughts as actually being material. Is actually in the West, we think of them as being these ethereal electrochemical impulses, but in yoga, they look at them as being as obvious as the body. They are material things. And like all material things, they arise, they live for a while, and then they die. And we look at as consciousness as being much more permanent. Now, you don't have to believe that, but experiencing that in meditation of witnessing thoughts coming and going makes you realize that thoughts just come and go and that you are not actually those thoughts. You are something much more beautiful and much more comprehensive and whole than that temporary experience. And that gives such tremendous freedom then. Did I answer your question about how to fix it? Do you have ideas? That was kind of just a brain dump from Gita.
No, I think that that's all good advice. I think
Okay.
it's things that people have come to anticipate from us, which is good because the more we continue to talk about these things, the more you're going to realize that they can help you be that elite performer that you want to be. A few final notes. I thought this was interesting. There's a few different things that I think are important for people to recognize. The first is that performance slumps are normal. You have to normalize temporary struggles in whatever that is. You're gonna make a mistake. That one mistake can't be the reason why the tower falls down. So that's number one. Number two, the nervous system is trainable. Confidence and calm can be built and it can be rebuilt.
Yes.
Okay? Because that's going to happen too. These are inevitable at some point. And the third is that recovery is part of an elite performance. Resilient performers recover faster, but they're not flawless. We talked about these athletes. We talked about, Shaquille O'Neal. I have a whole bunch of other ones. Brett Hull, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan. Any of these athletes that you've ever heard of that you look up to and say, man, I had their card growing up and it's worth a ton of money because they were great. Guess what? They weren't perfect. Michael Jordan missed shots. Michael Jordan had bad games. Wayne Gretzky had bad games. All of these athletes at one point or another had a struggle. We just choose over time to forget that at one point they had a bad game. Your passengers, your flight instructor, the examiners, they will see at one point or another that you will have a bad day. But that is not a measurement of your overall success, your overall career, your overall performance. It's just one moment where things didn't go the way you had hoped they would. And so when we're looking at all of these things, the common themes on all of this, these athletes, they stopped chasing the perfection. They shifted their focus from an internal blame system to I'm going to look at what's happening around me and I'm going to just focus on what the job is and what needs to be done. And then they trusted the process. Your flight instructor told you how to land an airplane. Trust that they taught you how to do it, that you know how to do it. You didn't forget. You're just getting in your own way. So that's my contribution to all of this. I know a lot of it is just trust it and it will fix itself. And that's a really hard thing to believe. So if you don't trust yourself, trust your instructor, trust your examiner, trust a mentor pilot who maybe you've flown with before, you've consulted before, trust the calm cockpit. We might know a thing or two, or at least Gita does. And the rest of it will fall into place. It may be annoying right now, but you'll get through it.
That is such sage advice. Thank you for that beautiful wrap up. It's so true that we can be thinking thoughts like, this is so hard. This is so challenging. I'm scared of messing up. Holy cow, I'm doing the thing. Thinking all of those thoughts at the very same time we are executing something beautifully. Just keep taking care of yourself, taking care of each moment. And as John said, keep your butt on center line. That's it. I love that. That's going to be like my new t-shirt, my new thing. Keep your butt on center line. That's all. Keep it simple. I love it. That's really great. I would love to hear from people out there who have just dealt with this in aviation, especially for me. This is a new field for me. It's so new and exciting still. And I'd love to hear from you pilots out there if you've struggled with the yips or had a moment where you've just worked through this or are in it now. Like, what does it feel like? What did you do that helped? What are the things that you wish some other pilot knew that you figured out that you can share with us so we can share it with other people? Please drop us an email at calmcockpit@gmail.com.
And with that, you can find us on social media, any of the major platforms, Calm Cockpit, or sometimes Calm Cockpit Podcast. Feel free to give us a review on whatever platform that you listen to us on. That helps us find other pilots just like you and hopefully get some really cool information out to people to just be better at what they're trying to accomplish. So with that, Geeta, fly smarter.
And stress less.
Airbus Air 1 departure is Airbus 321. Traffic holding crossing runway 33 left straight line.